The flashbulbs exploded like miniature lightning storms, reflecting sharply off polished wooden surfaces and glass chandeliers. The grand ballroom of the Manhattan Regency Hotel was overflowing with journalists, television cameras, and restless spectators, all gathered for what was billed as Donald Trump's most critical press conference yet. The air was dense, charged with the scent of nervous sweat, expensive cologne, and impending scandal. Donald Trump stood confidently behind a glossy podium, his eyes scanning the hostile crowd with a controlled, almost defiant intensity. His shoulders were squared, chin held high, every gesture carefully calibrated to project strength amid swirling controversy. Journalists shouted rapid-fire questions, each more aggressive than the last, their voices tangled in a frenzy of accusation and speculation about recently leaked audio recordings implicating Trump in political sabotage. "Mr. Trump, do you deny these allegations of deliberately undermining your rivals?" shouted a young CNN correspondent, her voice piercing through the chaos. Trump raised a single finger sharply, instantly quieting the room. His voice emerged steady, laced with an authoritative edge. "I categorically deny these ridiculous accusations. I am here to set the record straight once and for all." A sudden silence followed, thick enough to suffocate, as Trump's glare lingered over the reporter, daring her to challenge him again. Then out of nowhere, a small but surprisingly resolute voice broke through the stillness. "Mr. Trump, these..." Room collectively turned, puzzled and curious, searching for the source. At the back, standing on tiptoes, clutching a microphone nearly too big for her tiny hands, was an 8-year-old girl wearing a neat navy blue dress, her soft brown curls framing a face filled with innocence and determination. A tall reporter beside her adjusted the microphone stand, visibly intrigued. Trump's expression flickered momentarily from stern confidence to mild curiosity. A brief chuckle escaped him, breaking the tension just slightly. "And who might you be, young lady?" "My name is Emily Patterson," the little girl responded bravely, her voice trembling slightly, yet clear. "May I ask you a question, please?" Trump's mouth curled into a thin smile, mildly amused by the child's unexpected boldness. The journalists, intrigued, held their breath in eager anticipation. "Please, Emily, ask away." The girl took a deep breath, her gaze piercing straight into Trump's eyes with an unexpected intensity. "Mr. Trump, how do you forgive people who've hurt you?" Her words hung suspended in the air, their simplicity slicing through the carefully scripted performance like a blade. Trump's composure momentarily faltered, his eyebrows knitted together, lips slightly parted as if uncertain how to respond. Cameras exploded in another storm of flashes, capturing his rare hesitation. The room's attention sharpened further, sensing an extraordinary moment unfolding. Recovering quickly, Trump forced a smile, masking his discomfort, and leaned into the microphone. But before his response could come clearly, a buzz spread swiftly. Across the room, Emily's question had ignited something deeper than mere curiosity. Reporters scribbled notes frantically, murmurs of speculation rippled through the rows, and Trump realized instantly he was caught in a question far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. His eyes locked again with Emily's earnest stare, recognizing something undeniable. This innocent child's query had struck at a raw nerve he wasn't ready to expose. And yet, everyone now waited impatiently, hungry for his reply. All eyes zeroed in on Emily Patterson as she stepped forward into the intense spotlight, her small footsteps echoing softly on the polished marble floor. Clutching a bright pink notebook decorated with glittering stars in one trembling hand and gripping the oversized microphone tightly in the other, she moved slowly, purposefully, toward the front of the room. Journalists shifted aside instinctively, surprised by her calm bravery, clearing a direct path between the small child and the towering podium where Donald Trump stood waiting, a bemused expression lingering on his face. Emily's heart pounded furiously against her chest. Her cheeks flushed warm under the glare of the bright light, the cameras trained on her petite form, capturing every nuance of her innocent determination. A few murmurs broke out among the crowd, confusion blending with curiosity, as whispers spread rapidly, speculating about who this little girl might be and why she'd ventured into such a tense atmosphere. Trump smiled indulgently, his demeanor softening momentarily as he watched the child approach. Clearly amused by her innocent intrusion into his carefully choreographed event, he gestured magnanimously with his hand. "Come forward, Emily," he invited, his tone gentle yet patronizing, oblivious to the seriousness hidden behind her innocent exterior. Emily steadied herself with a deep breath, stopping mere feet away from Trump, her tiny figure contrasting sharply with his imposing frame. The cameras captured the striking visual contrast, innocence confronting power. With a swift glance down at the notebook, Emily's eyes flicked up again, locking firmly onto Trump's curious gaze. She held the microphone closer, her voice trembling yet unwavering as she prepared to deliver the words she'd rehearsed tirelessly at home. "Mr. Trump," she began softly, her tone remarkably composed, capturing immediate silence from the restless crowd. "Everyone says forgiveness is important, but—" She paused, swallowing nervously before pushing forward bravely. "How do you forgive people who've hurt you?" The simple yet profound question hung in the air, stunning the room into utter silence. Trump's amusement faded quickly, replaced by an expression of quiet surprise and discomfort. The journalists exchanged astonished glances. This innocent child had somehow, effortlessly, penetrated Trump's well-crafted armor. Trump opened his mouth as if to reply instantly, but the genuine earnestness in Emily's wide, hopeful eyes halted him momentarily, exposing his vulnerability before the entire room. The cameras flashed rapidly again, capturing this rare moment of uncertainty on Trump's face, a moment already set to ignite public imagination and debate. Emily, however, held her ground, standing firmly with earnest patience, unaware of just how profoundly she'd shaken the man standing before her, or how deeply her simple question had already begun to resonate with thousands watching around the world. Emily's gentle voice cut clearly through the stifling silence, reverberating powerfully in every corner of the room. "Mr. Trump, how do you—" "Forgive people who've hurt you?" Trump's eyes widened subtly, betraying a rare flicker of unease as the gravity of Emily's question fully registered. The practiced confidence drained momentarily from his face, replaced by a tension that spread visibly along his jawline. His lips tightened briefly before parting again, searching desperately for words that usually came easily to him, but now eluded his grasp. Around him, a wave of excitement surged among the journalists. Pens scribbled furiously across notepads. Cameras clicked at rapid-fire speed, capturing each subtle shift in Trump's demeanor. A reporter in the second row leaned forward eagerly, eyes narrowed, sensing vulnerability in Trump's hesitation. Emily remained perfectly still, her large, hopeful eyes locked patiently onto Trump's face. Her notebook trembled slightly in her hands, the glittering stars catching the harsh glare of the stage lights. The entire room leaned toward her, captivated by her sincerity, contrasting sharply against the calculated defenses of the man at the podium. Trump cleared his throat awkwardly, attempting to reclaim control. "Well, Emily," he began, the usual forcefulness in his voice diminished, tempered by an unfamiliar gentleness. Forgiveness is something it's about strength. You have to—" He hesitated again, his usual rhetoric failing him in the presence of genuine innocence. Cameras snapped eagerly, capturing his every awkward pause, each brief stumble an unspoken confession. A low murmur rippled through the room, subtle yet unmistakable. Emily's innocent, heartfelt question had unexpectedly exposed a vulnerability Trump had carefully hidden beneath a lifetime of public bravado. All eyes now fixed upon him with intense curiosity, sensing more was about to unravel. Trump took a deep breath, attempting once more to regain composure. But before he could continue, another voice cut sharply through the crowd, eager to exploit this unexpected moment of weakness. Trump cleared his throat abruptly, attempting to regain his balance. His characteristic confidence had been momentarily fractured, and everyone in the ballroom watched as he fumbled to restore it. "Well, Emily," he began slowly, his voice lacking the usual commanding assurance. "Forgiveness. It's about, strength. You know, real winners are strong, and forgiveness is, well, it's important to win. And when you're strong, you move forward. That's how winners forgive." His words hung awkwardly in the air, vague and noticeably evasive. Journalists exchanged sharp glances, brows raised skeptically, and several began furiously scribbling in their notebooks, sensing Trump had badly mishandled this delicate moment. Emily's bright eyes dimmed visibly, her hopeful expression fading into quiet disappointment. Her lower lip trembled slightly, quickly caught by cameras trained keenly on her face. Within seconds, screenshots of her gentle yet deeply disappointed gaze spread rapidly across social media platforms. Her innocent sincerity contrasted starkly against Trump's evasiveness. The image of Emily Patterson's disappointed face instantly captured the public's imagination. Twitter erupted in commentary, hashtags multiplying by the minute, spreading rapidly under captions like "Innocence meets politics and Emily deserves better." The world saw, in one heartbreaking snapshot, the stark difference between honest vulnerability and political evasion. Back at the podium, Trump sensed the atmosphere shifting around him, a cloud of discomfort settling thickly over the room. His jaw tightened defensively as aides whispered anxiously from the side of the stage, signaling urgently for him to wrap up. Recognizing his misstep, Trump attempted to shift gears abruptly, announcing, "Next question, please." But the damage had already been done. Emily's disappointed face, her quiet sadness so plainly visible, had already begun to reverberate globally, instantly intensifying public scrutiny and setting off a storm Trump was not prepared to weather. From the crowded corner of the room, Karen Mitchell stepped decisively forward, her polished heels clicking sharply against the marble, her expression stern and confident. Known for relentlessly grilling politicians, Mitchell's eyes were narrowed with intent, her polished, professional demeanor exuding both authority and a subtle hint of aggression. "Mr. Trump," Karen called out firmly, cutting through the uneasy silence. Her voice carried clearly, controlled and purposeful, instantly drawing every gaze toward her. Trump visibly stiffened as he recognized her, sensing trouble ahead. Considering Emily's heartfelt question, Mitchell continued smoothly, "Could you clarify exactly how your vision of strength and winning aligns with genuine forgiveness, especially considering your history of publicly ridiculing your critics and opponents?" Her words struck with surgical precision. The journalists around her reacted with murmurs and knowing glances, keenly aware she had just opened a new front in Trump's ongoing scandal. Mitchell watched Trump closely, a notebook clasped confidently. In one hand, a small recorder discreetly in the other, ready to capture every hesitation and evasion. Trump bristled noticeably, anger simmering just beneath his practiced expression of composure. Karen, always asking questions with hidden agendas, he retorted sharply, forcing a strained smile. I've been clear. Winning means being strong. People know this. But Mitchell wasn't satisfied. Stepping closer, her posture assertive yet calm, she pressed further. With all due respect, Mr. Trump, this isn't about winning. It's about genuine forgiveness. Are you capable of forgiving those who've opposed you, or is your definition of forgiveness just another strategic maneuver? The tension escalated. Sharply, the room practically vibrating with anticipation. Journalists shifted uneasily, cameras clicking rapidly, capturing Trump's clenched fists, gripping the podium tightly. His lips twitched in irritation, struggling to maintain his carefully constructed veneer of composure against Mitchell's pointed questioning. Yet Mitchell stood her ground, her expression unwavering, calmly awaiting his response. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether Trump would lash out, retreat behind his defenses, or somehow turn the tables on this formidable journalist. Trump's eyes flicked momentarily toward Emily, whose face still radiated quiet disappointment. For an instant, his expression softened, as if realizing how deeply this encounter was resonating beyond the confines of the conference room. But swiftly, he masked this vulnerability, narrowing his eyes at Karen Mitchell. "I'm fully aware of what forgiveness means," Trump finally replied, his voice colder now, firm and sharp. "And I assure you I don't need lectures on sincerity." But Mitchell merely smiled faintly, noting the slight tremor in Trump's voice. She had rattled him, and everyone in the room knew it. As Trump stepped back from the microphone, tension unresolved, the silence screamed with unanswered questions, leaving everyone eager and slightly fearful of what might happen next. Within minutes, the online world erupted into a furious storm of hashtags, memes, and relentless commentary. Across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, the moment Emily's innocent, disappointed expression confronted Trump's evasive reply quickly spread, turning into a digital wildfire. Hashtags like Emily Speaks Truth, Forgiveness Fail, and Emily vs. Trump trended rapidly, each accompanied by memes contrasting Emily's earnest face with Trump's visibly uncomfortable reaction. At the Trump headquarters, his communications team scrambled urgently. Phones rang incessantly, screens flashing tweets, viral videos, and rapidly mounting criticism. Voices rose anxiously in the PR war room, thick with tension. "We have a serious problem," snapped Lisa Reynolds, Trump's lead PR strategist, her voice tight with urgency as she scanned her buzzing smartphone. "We need immediate damage control. This child's question is resonating deeply, and people are accusing us of ducking basic human empathy." Across newsrooms nationwide, anchors dissected the press conference relentlessly. Networks replayed Emily's gentle question, followed by Trump's awkward response repeatedly, each repetition magnifying its impact. Panels of experts debated Trump's sincerity and humanity, with pundits expressing disbelief at how a simple child had managed to expose the hidden fragility beneath the billionaire's polished facade. Meanwhile, Emily's disappointed expression became iconic overnight, a powerful symbol shared by thousands, representing the innocence and honesty many felt missing in modern political discourse. Videos of her earnest demeanor flooded TikTok and Instagram, earning millions of views within hours, while prominent influencers praised her courage, calling Emily the voice of honesty in a climate dominated by evasion. Karen Mitchell seized the momentum, immediately publishing an article titled "When Innocence Confronts Power, Trump's Forgiveness Problem." The article sharply criticized Trump's inability to authentically address Emily's profound yet straightforward question, suggesting deeper underlying moral failings. This further fueled public debate as people began openly questioning Trump's character, values, and sincerity in ways his advisors hadn't anticipated. Trump, isolated in his Manhattan penthouse, paced irritably, eyes glued to multiple screens, broadcasting images of Emily's disappointed face alongside captions questioning his integrity. His jaw tightened, fingers drumming anxiously on the polished surface of his desk. Advisors murmured nervously nearby, suggesting strategies to regain control. Yet despite their best efforts, Trump's expression darkened with a rare anxiety. He understood clearly this wasn't a political scandal he could simply outmaneuver or dismiss. Emily had inadvertently unearthed something real, something deeply personal that resonated with people in ways his carefully managed image never could. As evening fell, the media storm showed no signs of fading, leaving Trump cornered in a public relations nightmare that threatened not only his image, but potentially something far more consequential, his carefully constructed facade of strength and invulnerability. The next move would be critical, but Trump knew the damage was already mounting. One innocent question had suddenly and unexpectedly forced him into a defensive posture, and the world was watching closely to see if he would recover. The television studio lights blazed fiercely, illuminating journalist Karen Mitchell's poised figure seated at the anchor desk. Behind her, a giant screen displayed stark images of Donald Trump, juxtaposed dramatically with Emily Patterson's gentle, questioning eyes. Karen leaned forward, slightly, her eyes intense, voice sharp and unwavering as she addressed millions of viewers live on primetime news. Tonight, new developments emerge around the explosive question asked by young Emily Patterson to former President Donald Trump. Karen began firmly, voice filled with controlled urgency. Leaked documents and emails obtained by our investigative teams suggest Trump's answer to Emily about forgiveness wasn't merely awkward, it was fundamentally dishonest. On the screen behind Karen, excerpts of emails flashed, snippets of harsh text highlighted ominously. Words like neutralize, destroy credibility, and take no prisoners appeared clearly. Social media instantly caught fire, streaming tweets and comments reflecting shock and anger. These leaked documents indicate Mr. Trump directly approved strategies aimed at sabotaging political opponents, Mitchell continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. This stands in stark contradiction to his evasive statements regarding forgiveness. Earlier today, the broadcast abruptly cut to an explosive segment, a previously confidential audio recording. Trump's voice echoed through living rooms nationwide, coldly instructing an aide, "Make sure they regret ever challenging me. I want no forgiveness, only victory." Karen paused dramatically, allowing the damning words to linger heavily. She leaned toward the camera again, voice softening deliberately as she delivered her next line. Perhaps Emily Patterson asked a question far wiser and more relevant than anyone imagined. The clip went viral instantly. Millions watched, re-watched, and shared Trump's own harsh words, sending shockwaves across newsrooms, online forums, and political circles. Public anger erupted further, with hashtags like #Trump exposed and Emily new trending worldwide within minutes. Inside Trump Tower, chaos reigned. Trump stood rigidly behind his desk, jaw clenched, eyes fixed angrily on the television. His senior advisors shouted urgently into their phones, their panic evident. "Who leaked these emails?" Trump demanded furiously, pounding his fist once sharply against the desk, rattling the ornate pen holder. Back in the studio, Karen Mitchell smiled faintly, satisfied that she'd shifted the narrative decisively. Yet her eyes glittered with an intensity that hinted she had only just begun to dismantle Trump's defenses. She ended the broadcast by looking directly into the camera, a knowing gleam in her eyes. "The public deserves the truth," Emily Patterson reminded us of the importance of honesty, Mitchell said evenly. "We will not stop investigating until the full truth emerges." The camera faded slowly from Karen's determined face to a still image of Emily's disappointed gaze, leaving audiences worldwide riveted, eager, and increasingly impatient for answers about Trump's true character and what hidden secrets might yet emerge. Emily sat curled up next to her mother on the faded blue sofa, eyes wide with wonder as she watched herself repeatedly appear on the small living room television screen. Outside, a quiet suburban street in Dayton, Ohio, stood under a pale grey sky, untouched by the chaos her simple question had ignited thousands of miles away. Meanwhile, reporters were swiftly piecing together the life of Emily Patterson, the little girl whose genuine inquiry had sparked a nationwide debate. Journalists quickly uncovered details of Emily's humble background. Her father, Robert Patterson, was a high school history teacher, and her mother, Jessica, a social worker, dedicated her life to community service, helping rehabilitate families torn apart by addiction and poverty. In hours, news vans parked along Emily's previously anonymous street, transforming her family's modest cream-colored home into a makeshift media hub. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, both alarmed and fascinated by the sudden surge of attention. "Emily Patterson is no ordinary 8-year-old, Karen Mitchell reported that evening on her popular show, her voice gentle but firm. Raised in a household dedicated to empathy and kindness, Emily's simple question about forgiveness wasn't merely curiosity, it was an echo of her upbringing. Viewers watched as images flashed on screen, showing Emily helping her mother organize clothing drives, volunteering at local shelters, and holding signs at community rallies that read, "Love first," and "Everyone deserves kindness." Photos emerged of Emily, her small hands carefully preparing sandwiches for the homeless, or standing shyly but proudly at community events beside her parents, both teachers actively involved in social justice initiatives. Mitchell continued her segment, clearly moved by Emily's sincerity. Her parents, Robert and Susan Patterson, declined to speak publicly tonight but issued a short statement. "We have always taught Emily that forgiveness is a strength, not a weakness. We're proud of her bravery in asking a question that touched so many." On social media, Emily's story resonated powerfully, flooding news feeds with messages of admiration and hope. Celebrities retweeted her quotes, calling Emily an inspiration and praising her bravery. Emily's gentle, sincere demeanor quickly became a symbol, a refreshing counterpoint to cynicism and political division. Yet, as America eagerly embraced Emily, Trump's advisors watched anxiously, their fears deepening. Emily was quickly transforming from an innocent bystander into a powerful symbol of compassion, honesty, and sincerity, qualities that Trump found increasingly challenging to embody in the public eye. In her small living room, Emily sat quietly on the sofa, clutching her glittery notebook tightly, bewildered yet hopeful. Her innocent eyes widened as she watched her own face appear repeatedly on TV screens across the nation, completely unaware that she had inadvertently become the emotional heart of a storm that was only just beginning. Karen Mitchell sat in a quiet corner of a dimly lit cafe, sipping cold black coffee, her eyes glued to the encrypted email blinking urgently on her laptop screen. Rain hammered relentlessly against the cafe windows, muffling the low hum of a conversation inside. The place was deserted, perfect for private exchanges, and exactly the setting Mitchell's contact had insisted upon. Across the small wooden table sat Julian Carter, a prominent aide to one of Trump's fiercest political rivals. Carter, thin-faced with glasses perched carefully on his nose, nervously adjusted his tie as he handed over a discreet black USB drive. "This contains everything you need," he whispered urgently, glancing around the nearly empty cafe. Documents, private recordings, evidence clearly showing Trump personally ordered smear campaigns, character assassination, and worse. Mitchell's heart quickened, pulse accelerating sharply at the magnitude of what she was receiving. Her fingers curled instinctively around the tiny drive, eyes narrowing slightly as she measured Carter's sincerity. How credible are these materials? Can they be traced back to you? Carter's lips curled into a tense smile, his voice hushed but resolute. Absolutely credible. Trump's fingerprints are all over this. His emails, recorded conversations, explicit directives. He's been careful, but not careful enough. And don't worry about tracing it back to me. This comes through layers of security, fully anonymized. Mitchell nodded, her heart racing with adrenaline. This was exactly the ammunition she'd hoped for, a chance to fully expose the hidden truths she'd long suspected but could never conclusively prove. As Carter rose, swiftly, casting one final cautious glance around the cafe, Mitchell tightly gripped the USB drive, knowing its contents would reshape the narrative completely. Hours later, inside her quiet apartment illuminated only by her laptop screen, Mitchell scrolled through the explosive documents, emails, and voice memos. Trump's unmistakable voice echoed softly through her headphones, bluntly issuing orders to advisors. "Whatever it takes, if they oppose me, they deserve no mercy. Crush their credibility entirely." Mitchell's pulse quickened as she uncovered deeper layers, strategies to smear political rivals, deliberate leaks of false scandals, ruthless efforts to discredit opponents. Her pulse quickened as she clicked open one particularly damning file labeled Operation Clean Slate, revealing Trump's systematic, carefully orchestrated efforts to undermine critics through manipulation and misinformation. The next morning, Mitchell walked into her newsroom radiating quiet confidence. Her production team exchanged curious glances, sensing something pivotal was about to unfold. She placed the USB drive firmly onto her producer's desk, meeting his questioning eyes directly. "Tonight's lead story will change everything," Mitchell declared firmly. "Trump won't escape this." At Trump headquarters, the panic was immediate and overwhelming. Staffers shouted over ringing phones, and Trump's press secretary paced nervously, his voice strained as he spoke rapidly into a phone. Trump himself stood frozen in front of a television screen, broadcasting Mitchell's teaser for her upcoming special report. Trump's hidden agenda, new evidence revealed tonight. Trump's fists clenched at his sides, eyes narrowing in fury. He turned sharply toward his senior aide, voice low and dangerous, trembling with barely restrained anger. "Find out immediately who betrayed us. No one leaves this room until we know." Yet beneath his anger lay another, deeper emotion: fear. Trump recognized the walls rapidly closing in, realizing his carefully constructed empire was suddenly, alarmingly, on the verge of collapsing around him. Across town, Emily Patterson continued playing quietly in her backyard, utterly unaware that the storm she had innocently sparked had now evolved into a hurricane threatening to tear apart the carefully constructed world of one of America's most powerful figures. In the bright, crowded briefing room of Trump Tower, Trump's spokesperson, Mark Reynolds, stepped up to the podium with calculated aggression radiating from his tense expression. Journalists sat forward, their faces strained in anticipation, sensing the brewing counterattack. "Let me be perfectly clear," Reynolds snapped firmly, eyes blazing directly into the clustered cameras. "Karen Mitchell's latest accusations are nothing more than a politically motivated smear campaign deliberately designed to mislead the public and damage Mr. Trump's reputation." The reporters erupted simultaneously, hurling sharp questions, but Reynolds waved them down aggressively, maintaining control. "You should question Ms. Mitchell's sources," he continued, voice rising forcefully. "Her evidence conveniently comes from anonymous political rivals who seek to distort facts to score cheap political points. This so-called evidence is manufactured, incomplete, and manipulated." Across the city, Karen Mitchell watched on a small television in her newsroom, a faint smirk of amusement dancing at the corners of her mouth. She had anticipated this reaction, yet her expression darkened slightly as Reynolds continued. "Karen Mitchell is no neutral journalist," Reynolds declared sharply, waving printed emails in front of the cameras for dramatic effect. "We have documented evidence showing her close communications with political figures openly hostile to Mr. Trump. She's compromised her integrity by relying on secret political operatives with clear ulterior motives." The room buzzed intensely, reporters' eyes widening as they frantically scribbled notes, desperately trying to capture every charged accusation Reynolds unleashed. Trump, watching silently from his private office, allowed himself a brief nod of satisfaction, acknowledging Reynolds's aggressive pushback. But beneath his practiced confidence lurked a lingering unease. He knew Reynolds's fierce defense brought only temporary relief. The documents Mitchell had shown were too precise, too credible. As Reynolds ended his fierce statement, staring defiantly into the camera, the room filled with anxious tension, buzzing with uncertainty. The spokesperson paused, his eyes challenging anyone to contest him before abruptly turning away without taking further questions. Yet within minutes, social media erupted again, this time divided sharply between loyal supporters praising Trump's resilience and those denouncing Reynolds's accusations as desperate deflection. Hashtags like #IgSite Team Trump Fights Back clashed fiercely against Mitchell Speaks Truth, leaving the public sharply divided. Meanwhile, Karen Mitchell calmly closed her notebook, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She knew the next move had to be even more decisive, more irrefutable. Trump's team had successfully muddied the waters, shifting some doubt onto her own integrity. The battle lines had clearly been drawn, and the stakes had escalated dangerously higher. Within days, Emily Patterson was seated in a plush, oversized chair opposite renowned talk show host Laura Bennett, her small feet barely touching the floor. Warm studio lights illuminated Emily's thoughtful, innocent face, framed by gently bouncing curls. Millions watched intently as Laura leaned in, her smile gentle yet curious. "Emily?" Laura began softly, her eyes warmly locked onto the girl's earnest face. "Your simple question to Mr. Trump about forgiveness has touched the hearts of millions. Can you tell us what forgiveness means to you?" Emily paused thoughtfully, clutching the pink notebook tightly in her lap, then answered in a gentle voice that belied her young age. "My mum and dad taught me forgiveness means you don't stay angry. Even when someone hurts your feelings, you try to understand why they did it. Forgiveness makes your heart feel better," the audience murmured appreciatively, charmed by the heartfelt sincerity of her words. Social media exploded once more as clips from Emily's interview were shared repeatedly, her innocent wisdom prompting thousands to reflect deeply on their own beliefs about forgiveness. Her words spread like wildfire online, earning widespread admiration, comments flooding timelines about her inspiring clarity and maturity. Simultaneously, major media outlets amplified the growing conversation. Headlines praised Emily as a rare beacon of empathy in a tense political climate, contrasting her simple yet profound wisdom against Trump's evasiveness. Twitter overflowed with tweets, hashtags, and heartfelt messages from users expressing how Emily's sincerity had moved them to reconsider their own bitterness and grudges. At Trump's headquarters, the atmosphere turned increasingly strained. Trump paced restlessly, silently watching Emily's televised appearance replay on a large office screen. Each eloquent answer she gave intensified the pressure he felt, pushing him further into a defensive posture. His advisors watched anxiously, recognizing the power of the emotional narrative that Emily was weaving, one that their standard PR tactics couldn't counter effectively. "She's just a child," Trump muttered bitterly to his top aide, frustration evident in his tight, tense voice. "But the media is turning her into some kind of saint. How do we counter that?" His aide shook his head quietly, clearly uncomfortable. "We can't, not directly. Any response will seem like bullying. We have to shift the conversation back to policy or—" "Policy won't work this time," Trump interrupted sharply, eyes narrowed in frustration. He knew this crisis wasn't political. It was personal, emotional, and painfully human. A child had cornered him, and public sentiment was shifting rapidly. Meanwhile, on stage, Emily Patterson finished the interview with a quiet but confident message. "I just want people, even really important people, to remember kindness matters. It's okay to say you're sorry. Forgiving means you're brave, not weak." As the studio audience erupted in applause and viewers across America leaned forward with newfound admiration, Trump's team watched uneasily from their offices, fully aware Emily's sincere words were pushing their carefully orchestrated defenses to a breaking point. Backstage, Emily hugged her parents tightly, unaware of the seismic shift she'd triggered, a shift that now threatened to shake Trump's carefully constructed public persona to its foundations. Late that evening, inside his dimly lit private office overlooking Manhattan, Donald Trump paced, anxiously, the reflection of city lights glinting faintly against the tall windows. His advisors sat around him in tense silence, expressions guarded, watching their boss's every restless step. Trump's usual confidence had fractured into a visible unease, his normally assured posture hunched slightly, fingers nervously twisting.
"A pen. This is spiraling out of control," Trump muttered, his voice tense and strained. He halted abruptly, turning sharply toward Michael Harris, his most trusted senior advisor. "They're digging too deep, Michael. What if they find out?" Harris exchanged a nervous glance with Rebecca Langley, the communications director. Her face paled slightly, realizing immediately what Trump was hinting at. A carefully hidden incident,
buried beneath years of calculated silence. Trump pressed closer, lowering his voice urgently, as though the room itself might betray his secret. "You remember what happened in Atlantic City. Nobody knows about that yet, at least nobody who would talk. But if Mitchell or the press finds out—" His voice trailed off, filled with apprehension. Langdon Pierce, Trump's legal advisor, leaned forward quickly, his expression grim. "Sir, that event was buried years ago. Documents were sealed, confidentiality agreements signed. There's no reason it should surface now." Trump's eyes flashed with frustration and anxiety, his jaw clenched tightly. "You don't understand how this works, Langdon. They're not playing fair. Mitchell has allies inside our circle. We've already seen that. If someone breaks ranks, that incident won't just damage me, it'll destroy me." The advisors exchanged anxious glances. Harris spoke, carefully, his tone deliberately calming. "Mr. Trump, we've controlled the narrative before. We'll handle it again. If necessary, we can—" Trump sharply interrupted him, eyes blazing. "You can't spin this one away, Michael. It's bigger than politics, bigger than anything we've ever dealt with."
If Emily Patterson's question about forgiveness gains more traction, people are going to dig deeper. They'll find that one incident. Forgiveness won't be enough, not for this. A heavy, tense silence enveloped the private office, illuminated
by only a few dim lamps and the flickering glow of television screens replaying Emily's innocent face on a muted news broadcast. Trump's eyes lingered heavily on the image, frustration and genuine worry clouding his features. He finally turned away sharply, dropping the pen onto the polished oak desk with a loud clatter. "Whatever we do next," Trump said darkly, his voice low and charged with barely restrained desperation. "We can't afford another mistake. If the Atlantic City incident gets out, I'm finished." Outside, Manhattan's skyline glittered coldly, indifferent to the turmoil brewing behind closed doors. But inside that room, Trump's team sensed clearly that something explosive lingered in the shadows of his past, something dangerous enough that even Trump's powerful public persona might not withstand its revelation. As the advisors hurried to strategize, Trump's worried gaze returned once more to the television screen, unable to shake the haunting certainty that Emily's simple question had opened doors that might never close again. The newsroom buzzed urgently as Karen Mitchell sat in front of her laptop, absorbing the explosive information she'd just received. Across the bright screen, a confidential email chain appeared, each message more revealing than the last. Her heart raced, pulse quickening with excitement as she pieced together the implications. The sender, Alex Grayson, one of Trump's closest aides. Mitchell recognized the name instantly, knowing how deeply Grayson was embedded within Trump's inner circle. Yet here, in bold, undeniable text, were messages documenting Trump's own anxiety about his past resurfacing. One line in particular stood out, sending chills down Mitchell's spine. He fears exposure about Atlantic City could end everything. Trump said himself he can't afford to admit mistakes. It would destroy his brand. Public forgiveness isn't an option, it's weakness. Within minutes, Mitchell had Grayson on the phone, his voice hushed but resolved, clearly uncomfortable but steadfast. "Karen," he explained nervously, "I'm tired of defending lies." The Emily Patterson moment was a wake-up call. Trump says one thing publicly, but behind closed doors, he's someone entirely different. "You realize what you're doing, Alex," Mitchell cautioned carefully, mindful of the enormity of this betrayal. "Once this goes public, there's no turning back." Grayson hesitated briefly, then exhaled deeply. "I know exactly what I'm doing. People need to know who he really is." The following evening, Mitchell presented her revelations live on air, the newsroom silent, electrified with anticipation. Her eyes locked intensely on the camera as she spoke. "Tonight, we reveal confidential communications directly from Trump's inner circle," she announced, her voice authoritative and clear. On screen, the leaked emails appeared, lines highlighted ominously, causing millions of viewers to gasp in disbelief. This evidence shows that while publicly dismissing forgiveness as strength, Mr. Trump privately acknowledges that genuine forgiveness would ruin his image, Mitchell explained firmly, her voice cutting clearly through America's living rooms. His own advisors admit privately that authenticity and honesty could dismantle his carefully constructed public persona. Instantly, social media reignited in a frenzy. Hashtags surged, or hang truth, about Trump, Grayson leaks, and, Emily was right, dominating trending topics across every major platform. In Trump's office, chaos erupted. Trump's furious voice echoed loudly through the halls, punctuated by the crash of glass hitting the wall. "Who betrayed me? Find them immediately!" His face reddened with rage, pacing aggressively before his stunned advisors. The carefully controlled image he'd cultivated for decades was unraveling before his eyes. At home, Emily Patterson watched quietly with her parents, her small hand tightly gripping her notebook. She didn't fully understand the complexities, but she sensed something significant unfolding, something directly connected to her heartfelt question. On screen, Mitchell ended her broadcast with sharp clarity. The American public deserves truth and authenticity from their leaders. Emily Patterson has shown us how powerful honesty can be. Now, we must hold Donald Trump accountable to that same standard. As the camera faded, Mitchell leaned back slightly, a faint but satisfied smile crossing her lips. Trump's inner circle was now fractured. His carefully hidden secret was closer than ever to being fully exposed. Meanwhile, Trump stood frozen in his penthouse, staring blankly at the television. His grip tightened painfully around the remote, knuckles turning white as his jaw set in. Cold fury. He knew now that someone inside his closest circle had betrayed him, and his carefully constructed empire stood dangerously close to collapsing entirely. The atmosphere inside Trump's Manhattan penthouse was tense, charged with an
unspoken urgency.
Trump paced rapidly across the expansive, glass-walled living room, the glittering skyline beyond offering no comfort. Advisors stood silently nearby, anxious eyes fixed upon him, waiting for his next move. "We need to shift the narrative," Trump finally declared, stopping abruptly to face Michael Harris. His voice was decisive, but beneath the familiar bravado lay a newfound edge of desperation. "This isn't just political anymore. People think I don't understand forgiveness, that I lack basic humanity." Emily's question has turned into a test.
"I cannot fail." "Sir?" Harris began cautiously. "Are you sure addressing this directly in public is wise right now? The backlash could—" Trump sharply interrupted him, eyes blazing with renewed determination.
"There's no other choice. Arrange an interview. Live, unscripted. I want Emily there too. I'll show them that I'm capable of confronting this head-on." Harris exchanged a concerned glance with the other advisors, but quickly nodded. "We'll set it up." Hours later, the news broke across every major network. Donald Trump had agreed to an exclusive, unscripted primetime interview, promising to address Emily Patterson's now famous question about forgiveness directly. Social media exploded in frenzied anticipation, with speculation rampant about Trump's intentions. Was this genuine remorse or another strategic maneuver? At home, Emily Patterson watched her parents whispering urgently, their voices anxious yet hopeful. They explained gently that Mr. Trump wanted her to appear alongside him on live television. "Are you sure you're okay with this, sweetheart?" her mother asked, gently smoothing Emily's curls back from her face. Emily nodded thoughtfully, clutching her pink notebook tighter. "I just want to know if he understands what forgiveness really means. Maybe this time he'll tell me." Back in his penthouse, Trump stared into the glittering night, haunted by memories he'd tried hard to bury. He knew the stakes. This was more than politics, this was personal. If he didn't take control now, the truth would consume him. The following day, the announcement shook the nation. Trump speaks live, an honest conversation on forgiveness with Emily Patterson. Within moments, the news ignited fierce debate nationwide. Thousands speculated openly whether Trump was finally ready to reveal genuine vulnerability, or whether this would simply be another carefully choreographed performance. Trump stood quietly, backstage before cameras started rolling, inhaling deeply to steady himself. He glanced toward Emily, who waited nervously yet resolutely nearby, her gentle eyes filled with quiet expectation. The studio lights flickered, signaling it was almost time. Trump straightened his tie, feeling a sharp, unfamiliar anxiety grip him. He stepped forward, meeting Emily's gaze briefly, acknowledging silently that the innocent child standing calmly before him had, without knowing it, placed his entire legacy at stake. Then the countdown ended, cameras went live, and millions across America leaned forward, breathless with anticipation. desperate to see if Trump's next words would finally redeem him or bury him forever. Under the brilliant glare of studio lights, Donald Trump and Emily Patterson sat opposite each other, surrounded by a silent, expectant audience. The air was electric with tension, anticipation etched on every face in the crowd. Cameras rolled silently, capturing the remarkable contrast. Trump's tense expression, guarded and carefully composed, and Emily's earnest face, serene yet quietly intense. The host nodded gently toward Emily, signaling her moment had arrived. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself, then raised her eyes toward Trump's face, sincere and unwavering. "Mr. Trump," Emily began softly, voice firm but gentle, eyes wide with genuine curiosity.
"I asked before, but maybe you didn't understand what I meant. What does forgiveness mean to you? How do you really forgive someone who's hurt you?" The audience held its collective breath, shifting their gaze instantly toward Trump. He paused,
Noticeably, the weight of Emily's question pressing visibly upon him. For once, his practiced defenses wavered, leaving him exposed in a moment of genuine uncertainty. Trump slowly exhaled, the carefully constructed image slipping from his face. He looked down at his hands briefly, gathering his thoughts before raising his eyes to meet Emily's sincere gaze. A rare vulnerability emerged, stripping away layers of practiced bravado. "You know, Emily," he began quietly, voice unusually subdued, "no one's ever asked me about forgiveness like this. When you're in my position, forgiving often feels dangerous. You learn quickly to hit back harder than you're hit, to protect yourself. But," his voice softened further, "maybe that's the problem." He paused, swallowing hard, visibly uncomfortable as the room grew utterly silent, hanging on each unexpected word. Emily watched him carefully, patiently, encouragingly. Trump leaned forward slightly, gripping the armrests of his chair tightly. "Forgiveness. Honestly, it's not easy for me. My whole life, I've equated forgiveness with weakness. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe true strength comes from letting go, even if it hurts." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked frantically, journalists scrambling to capture the profound moment unfolding on stage. Emily nodded slowly, considering Trump's words thoughtfully. "But, Mr. Trump," she pressed gently, unafraid to push deeper, "have you ever really forgiven anyone?" Trump hesitated again, visibly wrestling with himself. His expression softened further, eyes clouded by memories he rarely acknowledged publicly. "Once," he admitted slowly, carefully choosing his words. "A very long
"Time ago."
someone close to me betrayed me deeply. I decided never to forgive. That anger, it shaped everything I became. It drove me forward, but I wonder now if it took something important from me too." His admission hung heavily in the silence, punctuated only by occasional stunned whispers and soft clicks from cameras capturing each subtle shift in his face. Emily nodded slowly, quietly absorbing the gravity of his words. She leaned forward slightly, eyes earnest. "Maybe forgiving isn't losing. Maybe it's just being brave enough to give someone else another chance. Isn't that what strength really is?" Trump, visibly moved, stared silently at Emily, her gentle sincerity slicing through decades of carefully constructed defenses. The room fell utterly silent, everyone transfixed, sensing something transformative was happening. Finally, Trump sighed deeply, his voice thick with unguarded emotion. "Emily, perhaps you understand forgiveness better than any of us." As the audience erupted into hushed conversation, Mitchell watched from the sidelines, stunned and wary, her next move now uncertain. Trump had revealed a raw, startling honesty. that no one saw coming, turning Emily's innocent question into a deeply personal confession that no one could ignore. Yet as the cameras lingered on Trump's reflective expression, somewhere beyond the studio's walls, whispers grew louder. A hidden truth still lurked dangerously close to the surface, threatening to overshadow even this rare moment of authenticity. The silence in the studio deepened, charged with anticipation, as every gaze fixed intently on Donald Trump. Cameras clicked softly, capturing his expression, a quiet vulnerability rarely glimpsed in public. Trump leaned forward, placing his hands slowly, carefully, on his knees. His gaze met Emily's wide eyes, her gentle earnestness coaxing out a sincerity he had long kept buried. "Emily," Trump began softly, his voice unusually tender, carrying
a raw edge that echoed throughout the studio. "Your question, it touched something I haven't spoken about openly. Not ever."
He paused, visibly gathering strength before continuing. "My father taught me very early that forgiveness is weakness. In my family, you never forgave someone who crossed you. You punished them, you won, and you moved forward. Forgiveness wasn't even considered." The audience fell utterly silent, absorbing Trump's unexpected vulnerability. Emily leaned closer, her eyes filled with gentle encouragement, urging him onward. He sighed deeply, his shoulders relaxing slightly as though finally dropping a heavy burden. "When I was young, someone very close to my family hurt us deeply. It cost my father dearly, professionally and personally. My father never forgave. He made it clear forgiveness meant weakness, so I learned to be ruthless. I believed forgiveness meant losing control, giving up power, and letting people walk all over you." His voice cracked slightly, betraying an emotional depth he'd carefully concealed from public view. Cameras silently clicked, capturing every subtle shift of expression, every flicker of emotion. "But your question, Emily, it makes me reconsider everything," he admitted softly. "Maybe my idea of strength was flawed all along. Maybe the bravest thing a person can do is forgive, even when it feels impossible." The silence hung heavy in the air, profound and almost reverent. Trump's unexpected honesty resonated through millions watching across screens everywhere, igniting fresh, deeper conversations nationwide about strength, forgiveness, and true courage. Emily's eyes sparkled warmly as she listened, her gentle nod affirming Trump's sincerity. Quiet murmurs rippled throughout the studio, many deeply moved by Trump's startling confession. Yet as Trump slowly leaned back into his seat, a shadow of uncertainty passed fleetingly over his features. He knew his admission was powerful, reshaping public perception, but beneath it, anxiety lingered, a subtle fear that the vulnerable truth he'd just shared had also left him dangerously exposed. Across town, Karen Mitchell watched intently from her newsroom, her pen frozen mid-sentence, realizing with a jolt of apprehension and curiosity that Trump's sudden honesty might be the most significant turning point yet, one she hadn't anticipated. The vulnerability Trump had shown tonight could save him, or be exactly what ultimately destroyed him. Across the country, living rooms and cafes alike buzzed with stunned disbelief. Millions had watched Trump's startling admission unfold live, and the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News anchors, ordinarily polished and composed, struggled openly to process what they'd just witnessed. On CNN, veteran journalist Sarah Hamilton paused visibly, glancing away from the camera momentarily, as if searching for words she'd never expected to need. "What we've just witnessed," she finally said slowly, almost breathlessly, "is perhaps the most genuine and vulnerable moment Donald Trump has ever shared publicly. Frankly, it's unlike anything we've seen from him before." Social media erupted instantly, timelines flooded with rapid-fire reactions, Hashtags surged with dizzying speed. Trump gets real. Emily changed everything. And a genuine moment, all trending within minutes. Users, previously bitterly divided, found rare common ground in their astonishment, openly debating Trump's sincerity. Political commentators appeared across every network, urgently dissecting Trump's words. On MSNBC, famed analyst Mark Reeves openly admitted his shock, his expression visibly rattled. "I've covered Donald Trump for decades," Reeves confessed, "and I have never seen him reveal himself so genuinely. This wasn't political, this was personal. It feels transformative." Even Trump's critics paused uncertainly, momentarily silenced. Late-night talk show hosts scrambled to rewrite opening monologues, suddenly unsure how to respond to such a raw, unprecedented moment of honesty. In Washington, political insiders scrambled behind closed doors, urgently recalibrating their strategies. Trump's political rivals stood stunned, realizing the game had fundamentally shifted overnight. His vulnerability had humanized him in a way they'd never anticipated, and it unnerved them deeply. Meanwhile, in Trump's penthouse, advisors watched cautiously optimistic, yet wary. Trump himself stood quietly in front of the flickering screen, observing the replay of his own emotional confession, strangely detached. A subtle relief crossed his face briefly, perhaps even pride, mixed uneasily with deep concern. He knew he had taken a significant risk, breaking the unspoken rule he'd lived by for decades: never show weakness. Emily Patterson sat curled up beside her parents on their faded blue sofa, gazing quietly at the screen. She leaned into her mother's side, unaware of the magnitude of her influence, knowing only that her simple question had sparked something profound. Yet across town, in the dimly lit newsroom, Karen Mitchell stared intently at the screen, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Trump's unexpected openness had changed the narrative dramatically. She felt uncertain for the first time about what her next move should be. Trump had revealed a side no one anticipated, and now the entire nation waited breathlessly to see whether this moment marked genuine redemption or if it was merely a prelude to deeper turmoil still to come. In coffee shops, schools, and living rooms across the nation, Emily Patterson's quiet courage and Trump's startling vulnerability became catalysts for deep, heartfelt conversations. What had begun as a political scandal transformed overnight into a nationwide dialogue about empathy, forgiveness, and the possibility of genuine reconciliation. Social media feeds were no longer dominated by partisan fury, but were filled instead with deeply personal reflections. Stories of families reunited, friendships repaired, and grudges forgiven surfaced everywhere, each tagged with hashtags inspired by Emily's wisdom. Emily Effect, Brave Forgiveness, and Healing Together. At a bustling diner in rural Wisconsin, strangers sat clustered around a television screen, passionately discussing Trump's admission. "Never thought I'd see him speak that honestly," an elderly man murmured, shaking his head thoughtfully, his eyes misty. "Maybe we've all gotten forgiveness wrong." In classrooms nationwide, teachers paused their regular lessons to talk about Emily's brave simplicity. Her innocent yet powerful words, "Forgiving means you're brave, not weak," were scribbled across chalkboards, leading even skeptical teenagers into sincere discussions about empathy and emotional strength. Prominent celebrities joined the dialogue. Online, sharing their own struggles with forgiveness and praising Emily for her gentle wisdom. Famous actress Olivia Carter tweeted, "Emily Patterson reminded us that compassion and strength are the same thing. Thank you, Emily, for changing the conversation." Television networks aired special segments inviting psychologists, philosophers, and religious leaders to debate the deeper meaning behind Trump's unprecedented honesty. Pastor Jamal Watson, speaking passionately on CNN, declared, "Emily and Trump showed us together that healing divisions isn't just political, it's personal. Forgiveness might be the strongest act of courage in America right now. Yet behind closed doors, Trump's advisors watched the national conversation nervously. Trump himself sat quietly in his penthouse office, reading letters that poured in, handwritten notes from voters, former critics, and even old friends he'd lost touch with, each offering forgiveness or sharing how his honesty had inspired them. Trump's fingers trembled slightly as he held one particular letter. "I spent years angry at you," wrote an old business partner. "But Emily's bravery and your humility made me reconsider. If you meant what you said, I forgive you." Meanwhile, Emily's home was inundated by supportive messages and small gifts, flowers, handmade cards, and drawings from children inspired by her courage. Her parents stood quietly in awe, deeply moved by how powerfully their daughter had reshaped public conversation. However, despite the warmth and optimism blossoming nationwide, Karen Mitchell sat quietly in her newsroom office, thoughtfully tapping her pen against her notebook. Trump's emotional revelation had shifted everything, complicating her original narrative and raising questions even she felt compelled to explore honestly. Yet deep within her, files remained unanswered questions, documents, and secrets still unaddressed. As the nation embraced Emily's message of empathy and forgiveness, Mitchell wondered silently if this moment of profound unity might also conceal something darker beneath its surface, something capable of unraveling everything once again. Karen. Mitchell leaned forward, eyes sharp and determined, seated directly opposite her colleague on a panel during the primetime broadcast. Around them, a brightly lit studio hummed with palpable tension. Across America, millions tuned in eagerly, sensing the drama was far from over. "Look, let's be very clear about what we're seeing," Mitchell declared sharply, interrupting another analyst mid-sentence. Her voice carried a forceful edge, unmistakably challenging. "Donald Trump has spent decades carefully curating his public persona. Do we really believe a single emotional moment, one conveniently broadcast to millions, is enough to erase years of ruthless behavior?" Her fellow panelists shifted uneasily, recognizing Mitchell was pushing against the swelling tide of public sentiment. But she pressed on relentlessly, eyes narrowed fiercely. "Trump is a master of media manipulation. Isn't it possible, even probable, that his sudden openness is just another calculated PR move?" The other analyst, a seasoned political commentator, tried to interject calmly. "But Karen, we've never seen Trump like this." Mitchell abruptly cut him off, her voice raised and eyes blazing with passion. "Exactly. And that's precisely my point. Trump recognized that Emily Patterson's sincere, innocent question resonated deeply. He's an expert at spotting opportunities, and he's seized on Emily's sincerity to rebuild his own damaged reputation. Let's not confuse vulnerability with calculation. Social media immediately split again. Many supported Mitchell's skepticism, using hashtags like trust actions, not words, and don't be fooled, reigniting the fierce debate. Yet others accused her of cynicism and attacking sincerity, arguing Trump deserved credit for rare honesty. Inside Trump's penthouse, he watched Mitchell's aggressive questioning on screen, his jaw tightening in frustration. Beside him, his advisor Michael Harris shook his head slowly, sighing deeply. "We knew Mitchell wouldn't back down easily." Trump, visibly irritated but also wary, folded his arms defensively. "She's relentless. She'll undermine everything if we don't stop."
Her.
Across town, Emily sat quietly at her family's kitchen table, eyes wide and concerned, as she watched Mitchell's fierce accusations unfold. She turned to her mother, confusion clouding her innocent expression. "Mom, do you think he was telling the truth?" Her mother squeezed Emily's small hand reassuringly. "Sweetheart, you opened an important conversation. No matter what Mr. Trump does, your honesty has already changed things." But at the television studio, Mitchell remained fiercely
Unyielding, her voice hardened with conviction.
Genuine forgiveness requires more than just words. It demands action. Trump's entire history is filled with retaliation and aggression. Until we see actions matching these sudden words, we should remain skeptical. Mitchell's forceful critique hung heavily in the air, reintroducing uncertainty into a moment that had seemed, just hours before, to offer rare clarity. The nation, again divided, waited anxiously for Trump's next move, unsure if his sincerity was a fleeting performance or something deeper. In her newsroom office, Mitchell turned away from the cameras, breathing deeply to calm herself. Yet, as she stared quietly at the glowing screens, she couldn't escape an unsettling thought. Perhaps Trump's sincerity had affected her more deeply than she cared to admit. Late at night, in the cavernous lobby of Trump Tower, Donald Trump stood rigidly at a podium flanked by a cluster of microphones. Cameras flashed incessantly, illuminating his tense, determined expression. Journalists packed tightly into the space, eager and restless, sensing another pivotal moment approaching. Trump held his hand up sharply, instantly silencing the murmurs in the room. He took a deep breath, eyes glinting fiercely beneath furrowed brows. "For days, Ms. Karen Mitchell has relentlessly questioned my sincerity, my integrity. Tonight, I intend to settle this matter directly." Trump leaned forward, his voice clear, authoritative, but carrying an undercurrent of genuine vulnerability. "Karen Mitchell accuses me of staging sincerity. Well, I propose we settle this openly. Live on national television, just me and Karen."
Mitchell face to face. No scripts, no restrictions, no escape. I'm ready to answer her accusations directly, right in front of the American people. A stunned silence enveloped the room. Journalists briefly speechless, pencils frozen above.
Notebooks. Then an explosion of shouted questions erupted simultaneously, reporters scrambling to digest Trump's bold challenge. Trump simply stood quietly, meeting their incredulous gazes evenly, projecting absolute confidence. Crosstown, Karen Mitchell sat rigidly in her newsroom office, eyes widened with shock as she watched Trump's bold declaration live on screen. Her colleagues around her exchanged stunned glances, astonished by Trump's unexpected move. A tense hush filled the newsroom as Mitchell quietly considered her next step. Social media ignited again, now dominated by fierce debate. Was Trump genuinely seeking redemption, or had he masterfully called Mitchell's bluff? Hashtags like Trump vs. Mitchell, Live Truth, and @Trump Challenge trended instantly, sharply dividing opinion nationwide. Trump's advisors, standing tensely behind him, watched anxiously. Michael Harris's heart raced nervously, knowing Trump's gamble was risky, yet potentially transformative. Trump's public challenge had shifted momentum dramatically, placing Karen Mitchell in the uncomfortable position of either accepting his daring invitation or appearing afraid to confront him directly. At home. Emily Patterson watched quietly with wide eyes, clutching her pink notebook close to her chest. Her parents whispered anxiously nearby, deeply aware of the implications of Trump's surprising move. Emily felt hopeful, yet uncertain. Perhaps Mr. Trump truly wanted to understand forgiveness after all. But back in the newsroom, Mitchell exhaled, slowly, realizing Trump had just raised the stakes dramatically. Accepting would mean facing Trump head-on, exposing herself to enormous risk, yet rejecting would permanently undermine her credibility. Trump had cleverly cornered her, reclaiming control of the narrative in a single, decisive move, leaving Karen Mitchell and the nation holding their breath in anxious anticipation. Under the stark, relentless glare of the studio lights, Donald Trump and Karen Mitchell sat facing each other, separated only by a narrow glass table. Behind them, a massive digital backdrop showcased bold words: "Live, debate, truth and forgiveness." The auditorium, packed tightly with journalists, analysts and anxious viewers, buzzed with restrained tension. Mitchell leaned forward sharply, eyes locked directly onto Trump's face, determination etched deeply into her features. "Mr. Trump," she began firmly, voice clear and unwavering, "for years you've shown yourself to be ruthless toward your opponents. Now suddenly you claim you've embraced forgiveness. How can the American public trust that this isn't another calculated performance?" Trump's eyes narrowed briefly, his face tense but resolute. Instead of responding defensively, he leaned forward calmly, meeting Mitchell's challenge directly. "Karen, I'll admit openly, my life has been defined by competition."
It's true, I haven't always chosen forgiveness. I thought strength meant never backing down, never letting anyone get the better of me. He paused, holding her gaze steadily, his voice softening just enough to reveal sincerity beneath his tough exterior. But Emily Patterson's question made
me realize something profound, that perhaps the greatest strength comes from humility. Maybe admitting when you're wrong and showing mercy isn't weakness. Maybe it's a strength I've neglected too long. The room fell utterly silent, journalists glancing rapidly at each other, taken aback by Trump's surprisingly candid admission. Mitchell hesitated, momentarily thrown by Trump's unexpectedly genuine response. Quickly regaining her composure, she pressed harder. "Yet your leaked emails clearly indicate you intentionally harmed opponents. How do you reconcile this ruthless strategy with your sudden emphasis on forgiveness?" Trump nodded slowly, thoughtfully absorbing the force of her
accusation, yet now appearing oddly unruffled.
"Those emails were real," he acknowledged openly, startling even Mitchell with his honesty. "I made mistakes. I chose power over empathy. And perhaps those choices were wrong. That's the honest truth." Gasps rippled softly through the audience, amazed at Trump's blunt acknowledgement of responsibility. Mitchell's eyes flickered with uncertainty, momentarily losing the upper hand she'd so confidently held. Sensing an opening, Trump leaned in closer, voice calm but powerful. "I can't change what I've done, but I can choose who I become. Emily showed me, and all of us, that true strength comes from being honest about our mistakes. I'm trying that tonight, openly, with no excuses." Mitchell shifted uncomfortably, her posture momentarily faltering, realizing Trump had seized control with sincerity she hadn't anticipated. A hush fell over the room, filled with admiration, surprise, and hesitant applause, a startling shift, in public opinion palpable and immediate. Then, from the audience, a small voice unexpectedly called out. Emily Patterson, sitting quietly near the front row, spoke clearly, gently, cutting through the tension. "Mr. Trump, thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." The room erupted into spontaneous applause, cameras flashing wildly. Mitchell's face flushed slightly, recognizing the power slipping from her grasp. Trump's sincerity had unraveled her carefully prepared attack, leaving her position suddenly weakened and uncertain. Yet as Trump nodded gratefully toward Emily, the sudden warmth filling the room didn't erase an unsettling tension lingering. Just beneath the surface, an unresolved unease, a hidden truth still waiting silently in the shadows. Even as Trump's sincerity resonated deeply, Mitchell sensed there was more, a truth still concealed, capable of undoing everything he'd gained. Tonight, the debate had dramatically shifted the narrative, But had Trump truly escaped the storm or merely postponed its devastating arrival? As Karen Mitchell opened her mouth to deliver another sharp retort, Emily suddenly rose from her chair, stepping courageously toward the bright stage. The debate froze instantly. Every camera, every eye in the studio locked on to the small figure standing bravely between two titans, clutching her pink notebook tightly in her small hands. "Please," Emily said softly, her voice clear yet trembling slightly, filled with earnest urgency. "You're both fighting, but I don't think that's how forgiveness works. Isn't it supposed to bring people closer, not push them apart?" Her simple words resonated deeply, slicing through the fierce atmosphere like a gentle, calming wave. Trump and Mitchell turned simultaneously, startled and silenced by Emily's quiet courage. Emily continued firmly, voice stronger now, emboldened by the room's attentive silence. "Mr. Trump, you said forgiveness makes you strong. And Ms. Mitchell, you want the truth. But right now, you're both trying to win instead of really hearing each other. Maybe forgiveness means being brave enough to stop fighting, even when it's hard." Mitchell's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her carefully controlled expression. Trump's posture softened visibly, tension draining slowly from his shoulders. The audience murmured softly, struck profoundly by the child's sincere wisdom, recognizing in her gentle voice a clarity that had escaped them all. Trump stared silently at Emily, her gentle words echoing powerfully in his mind, pushing through decades of defensiveness. He nodded slowly, humbled. "Emily's right," he admitted quietly, voice thick with genuine reflection. "Maybe this is exactly why we struggle so deeply as a country. We're more interested in defeating each other than understanding." Mitchell looked briefly taken aback, caught off guard by Trump's candid acknowledgement. Yet beneath her surprise, a reluctant respect began to show in her eyes. She paused thoughtfully, before responding softly, her usual aggression momentarily subdued. "Perhaps. Emily's shown us something we couldn't see on our own." A murmur of agreement rippled gently through the studio audience. Social media erupted. Once more, thousands quickly sharing Emily's poignant intervention, praising her wisdom and courage. Headlines shifted instantly, now reflecting the simple power of a child's honest plea for empathy and unity. Emily stood calmly, quietly proud, her innocent sincerity having broken through the fierce battle lines between Trump and Mitchell. The room seemed lighter somehow, touched by hope, even if briefly. Yet backstage, Trump's advisors exchanged anxious glances. They knew Emily's innocent wisdom had temporarily united opposing sides, yet beneath the momentary harmony lay deeper, darker truths, still dangerously close to surfacing. As applause swelled around her, Emily offered a gentle smile, unaware that while she'd bravely called for peace, the fragile truce she'd created might soon be shattered by revelations still hidden, waiting ominously in the wings. For a moment, the studio was utterly still. The weight of Emily's words lingered in the air, pressing on the hearts of everyone in the room. Then, slowly, it began. One person in the audience clapped, then another and another. Within seconds, the studio erupted into a standing ovation. Applause thundered through the room, not the polite kind reserved for political debates, but something deeper, more visceral. It wasn't for Trump, it wasn't for Mitchell, it was for the small girl standing between them, the one person in the room who had cut through the noise with unshakable clarity. Trump blinked in surprise, momentarily speechless as the energy in the room shifted. He had expected to dominate the debate, to either solidify his redemption or fend off Mitchell's attacks, but now a child had become the voice of reason, and he found himself standing in the wake of something far more powerful than his own words. Karen Mitchell, still seated, exhaled slowly, watching as the audience, journalists, and even the camera operators rose to their feet. She had built her career on exposing truth, but in this moment she realized Emily Patterson had just done that effortlessly, without accusations, without aggression, without manipulation, just the pure, undeniable truth. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Emily for President trended within minutes, followed closely by wisdom of a child and let the kids talk. Thousands flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram with praise for the little girl who had, in one gentle yet unyielding moment, changed the conversation from attack to understanding. Emily Patterson just schooled every politician in America. Imagine if world leaders had even half the wisdom of this child. Strength isn't in the loudest voice, it's in the one that tells the truth. Emily Speaks news anchors scrambled to keep up with the cultural shift happening in real time. CNN immediately cut to a panel discussion about Emily's impact, with one commentator calling her the voice of moral clarity America didn't know it needed. Meanwhile, Fox News ran a headline, "Child calls for unity. Is America ready to listen?" Even celebrities joined in. Actor Chris Evans tweeted, "Forget Captain America, Emily Patterson is the real hero." Talk show host Ellen DeGeneres posted, "Emily, if you're watching, call me. You've got an open invitation to the show." In homes across America, parents sat beside their children, explaining why Emily's words mattered. Teachers played clips of the debate in classrooms, encouraging students to discuss what forgiveness really meant. Conversations that had once been about Trump, politics, and scandals had transformed into something bigger, a nationwide reflection on empathy, kindness, and the courage to listen. But inside Trump Tower, behind closed doors, the reaction was far less celebratory. Trump's advisors were scrambling, whispering among themselves, trying to decide whether this shift could work in their favor or whether Emily had unknowingly pulled Trump into an even deeper, more unpredictable battle. Trump, still standing, on stage, finally clapped too, nodding at Emily with something that resembled genuine respect. He knew one thing for certain: this moment belonged to her, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing. Karen Mitchell sat stiffly in her chair, hands clasped tightly together as the standing ovation thundered around her. She had prepared for a ruthless debate, a fierce takedown of Trump's manufactured sincerity, but she had not prepared for this, a child cutting through the noise with pure, undeniable wisdom. As the applause stretched on, cameras captured a subtle but critical moment. Mitchell's jaw tightened, her fingers tapping anxiously against the glass table. The flicker of frustration in her eyes was unmistakable. It wasn't that she disliked Emily, she knew the girl was genuine, but Emily had just unraveled the precise line of attack Mitchell had meticulously built over the past week. And worse, she had done it without trying. Trump noticed it. The audience noticed it. And, most dangerously, social media noticed it. On Twitter, the backlash against Mitchell was immediate and brutal. Mitchell just got humbled by an 8-year-old and she hated it. Emily called for unity and Karen looked like she wanted to fight a child. Yikes! Mitchell exposed. Maybe the problem isn't Trump, maybe it's people like her. As the applause finally faded, Mitchell cleared her throat, shifting in her seat. She needed to regain control, to reassert her authority. She turned sharply to Trump, her voice firm. "Mr. Trump, with all due respect, a touching moment doesn't erase years
of deception. The American people deserve more than just emotional confessions."
A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but they were drowned out by a more significant reaction, a wave of disapproval. The audience, still moved by Emily's sincerity, reacted visibly to Mitchell's harshness. A few heads shook, some crossed their arms. Trump, sensing an opportunity, smiled, a slow, knowing smile. He sat back in his chair, casually adjusting his cufflinks. "Karen," he said smoothly, "sometimes it takes a child to remind us what really matters. Maybe you should listen." The crowd erupted in laughter, not mocking but approving. Mitchell's cheeks burned slightly. She had walked into a trap of her own making. If she pushed too hard now, she risked looking bitter, out of touch. If she backed down, she lost credibility. A reporter from the audience stood up, directing a question at her instead. "Ms. Mitchell, do you think Emily was wrong in what she said?" Mitchell hesitated. Too long. The moment dragged, uncomfortable and revealing. "No," she finally admitted, her voice tight, controlled. "Emily is a thoughtful and intelligent young girl, but that doesn't mean we ignore reality." The audience was no longer entirely on her side. She had spent years positioning herself as a fearless journalist exposing deception wherever she found it. But tonight, that image was crumbling. She no longer looked like the truth seeker. She looked like someone unwilling to accept when truth arrived in an unexpected form. As the debate wound down, Trump walked off the stage with an air of ease, pausing only to shake Emily's hand before exiting. Mitchell, however, remained seated for a moment, staring at the crowd, sensing a shift she wasn't sure she could recover from. By the time she returned to the newsroom, the headlines were already against her. Mitchell missteps. Did a journalist just become the villain? Trump wins the night, but Emily steals the show. The moment Mitchell lost America. She had challenged Trump on his sincerity, but tonight, sincerity had come from the one person no one had expected, and it had left. Karen Mitchell, standing on the wrong side of history. The next morning, the country was still buzzing from the debate. News stations replayed clips of Emily Patterson's heartfelt intervention. Analysts dissected every word, and social media remained on fire with reactions. But amid all the noise, one headline began to dominate the conversation. Trump extends an olive branch. Is this his redemption arc? It started during an impromptu press conference outside Trump Tower. The usual cluster of reporters gathered, eager to press Trump for a response to the ongoing fallout. Cameras clicked rapidly as he stepped forward, adjusting the cuffs of his suit. His expression was uncharacteristically thoughtful, his usual bravado softened. "Before we start," Trump began, raising a hand to quiet the murmuring journalists, "I want to say something about Karen Mitchell." The name alone reignited the tension. Everyone leaned in, bracing for the attack they assumed was coming. After all, Mitchell had been one of Trump's most relentless critics for years. If anyone expected a cold, dismissive remark, it was now. But instead, Trump sighed, glancing at the reporters with a rare look of sincerity. "Look, I've had my fair share of battles with the press," he admitted. "And Karen Mitchell? She's been tough on me, very tough. Sometimes unfair, sometimes brutal. But she does what she believes in, and I can respect that." The reporters exchanged shocked glances. This was not the Trump they were used to. Trump continued, his voice measured. "Last night, Emily Patterson reminded us all about forgiveness. And you know what? She's right. If I stand up here and talk about forgiveness, but then hold on to
Grudges, what does that make me? He shook his head. "So, Karen, if you're watching, I forgive you." The silence was electric. No one had expected this. Karen Mitchell, watching live from her newsroom, sat frozen in her chair. She had spent years scrutinizing Trump, challenging him, pushing him at every turn. And now the man she had spent so much effort exposing had
just flipped the entire conversation on its head. The shift in public perception was immediate. Social media, which had been divided, began trending with #forgiving Trump and #growth matters. Even longtime critics admitted they hadn't seen this side of him before. CNN ran a segment titled, "Trump's Most Unexpected Move, Yet Genuine Grace." Fox News declared, "A new chapter, Trump shows leadership through forgiveness." And, most surprisingly, even some of Trump's political opponents hesitated to dismiss the moment outright. Later that day, Mitchell herself was forced to address it. Sitting stiffly in front of the camera, she spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. "Donald Trump and I have never agreed on much, but last night Emily Patterson reminded us all of something greater than politics. If he is sincere in his words, then I will acknowledge that." It wasn't an admission of defeat, but it was as close to a concession as Mitchell had ever given. Meanwhile, in her quiet suburban home, Emily Patterson sat cross-legged on the floor, watching everything unfold on the TV. She turned to her parents, a small, thoughtful smile on her face. "See," she said simply. "Forgiving is brave." Across the city, in his gilded penthouse, Trump sat alone, sipping coffee as he watched the news. He had won many battles in his life, but for the first time, it felt like he had won something different, something real. And for once, even he wasn't sure what that meant. Just as the media began shifting toward the surprising narrative of Trump's redemption, a new storm erupted, one that no one saw coming. It started with a cryptic post from an anonymous whistleblower account on X, formerly Twitter. Karen Mitchell wasn't acting alone. She was used. And the real story is just beginning. The Mitchell Files. Within minutes, journalists, political insiders, and conspiracy theorists alike scrambled to uncover what it meant. Then the first leaked document surfaced. A series of emails and encrypted messages traced back to a high-level political strategy firm with deep ties to Washington suggested that Mitchell had been fed information with a specific goal, not just to expose Trump, but to derail any potential resurgence of his influence. The most damning message was a directive from an anonymous political operative. "Mitchell needs to keep pressing the corruption angle. Keep him cornered. We can't let him turn this around. Use Emily if necessary. Public opinion will follow." That one line ignited a firestorm. Had Karen Mitchell been unwittingly, or worse, knowingly, weaponized in a larger effort to destroy Trump, using Emily Patterson's sincerity as leverage? The reaction was swift and brutal. Fox News, breaking, leaked emails. Suggest Mitchell was political pawn, who's pulling the strings? CNN, explosive leak. Was the media pushed to take Trump down? Social media, who used Mitchell? Team Mitchell, exposed. Truth over politics. The irony wasn't lost on the public. Karen Mitchell, the journalist who had built her career on exposing manipulation, was now at the center of a massive political scandal. At a hastily arranged press conference, Mitchell, her face pale but composed, stood in front of a sea of cameras. "I was never part of any political conspiracy," she stated firmly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But I won't deny that forces larger than me may have sought to influence this story. If I was used, I will find out by whom. But the damage was done." Inside Trump Tower, the mood had shifted from cautious optimism to quiet triumph. Trump leaned back in his chair, watching the coverage unfold with a knowing smirk. "They played themselves," he muttered, shaking his head. Michael Harris, his top advisor, nodded. "The question now isn't whether you're redeemed, sir. It's how far this goes. If they manipulated Mitchell, who else is involved?" Meanwhile, in her modest home, Emily Patterson sat between her parents, watching the breaking news. She furrowed her brows, confused. "Why do people do things like this?" she asked softly. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Because sometimes people care more about winning than about doing what's right." Emily frowned, looking at the TV, where Mitchell's shaken expression filled the screen. "I think she's sorry," she murmured. And for the first time since this entire whirlwind began, Karen Mitchell sat in her newsroom, staring at the leaked messages in front of her, realizing that the story she had been chasing had just flipped upside down. She had been so focused on exposing Trump's flaws that she never saw the trap she had walked into herself. And now, the real question wasn't about Trump's redemption. It was, who was really pulling the strings? The newsroom was unusually quiet as Karen Mitchell sat alone at her desk, staring at the teleprompter in front of her. She had delivered breaking news, exposed corruption, and held the powerful accountable for years. But tonight, she was the story. And she knew she had only one chance to get this right. The bright red live indicator flashed on the studio cameras. Millions of Americans watched as Mitchell, normally poised and composed, exhaled deeply before facing the nation. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying a weight it never had before. "For years, I have prided myself on pursuing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. I have challenged those in power, questioned narratives, and demanded accountability. But tonight, I must hold myself to the same standard." She paused, scanning the teleprompter, but then, unexpectedly, pushed it aside. The control room panicked as she chose to speak from the heart instead. "The truth is, I got this wrong," she admitted, voice steady but raw. "I allowed my distrust of Donald Trump to cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I failed. Not just as a journalist, but as someone who claims to value honesty above all else." Gasps rippled through the live audience. The country held its breath. Mitchell continued, her expression heavy with reflection. "I have since learned that elements within the political world sought to use me as a pawn, feeding me information with an agenda that extended beyond journalism.
I was manipulated, but I take full responsibility for my actions. I should have asked more questions. I should have seen it." She let the words settle before adding, "And there's one person in particular who reminded me of what integrity really looks like: Emily Patterson." At the mention of Emily's name, camera feeds cut to a small live window where Emily, watching from home with her parents, blinked in surprise. "Emily," Mitchell said, her voice softening, "your wisdom, your sincerity."
"And your belief in forgiveness showed me something I had forgotten. That truth isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about understanding, listening, and, sometimes, letting go." Mitchell straightened her shoulders, looking directly into the camera. "So, to the American people and to Mr. Trump, I offer a sincere apology. Not because I was wrong to challenge him, but because I was wrong in how I did it. I let my need to be right overshadow the bigger truth, and for that I ask forgiveness." The studio remained silent for a long, electrifying moment. Then applause erupted, not just from the newsroom audience, but across the nation. Social media exploded. Mitchell owns it, that apology accepted, and "die forgiveness" in action trended instantly. Even some of Mitchell's most loyal supporters, initially shocked by her admission, began praising her courage to own her mistake. Meanwhile, in Trump Tower, the former president watched, with an unreadable expression. His advisors waited for his reaction, but he simply nodded. "She did the right thing," Trump muttered. "Took her long enough, but she did it." Emily, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her living room, looked up at her mother with a small, satisfied smile. "See? Forgiveness is strong. she whispered. And across the country, as debates raged on, one undeniable truth emerged. Emily Patterson's simple question had done something no political strategy, no attack ad, and no journalist had ever achieved before. She had changed the conversation. For the first time in years, Americans weren't just talking about politics. They were talking about what it meant to be human. The anticipation was electric. Networks had preempted regular programming. Cable news anchors speculated endlessly. Across the country, bars, living rooms, and cafes filled with people watching the same screen, waiting for the speech that no one ever expected Donald Trump to give. The camera panned to the grand hall of Trump Tower, where an elegant stage had been set, draped in deep blue, illuminated with the presidential gold-trimmed American flag behind him. The podium, typically adorned with campaign slogans or sharp political branding, bore only one word: forgiveness. As Trump stepped onto the stage, the room hushed. He didn't carry the usual swagger, the combativeness that had defined so many of his past public addresses. Instead, he moved deliberately, nodding to the audience with a calm that felt strangely
foreign. He gripped the edges of the podium, took a long breath, then began.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to talk about something that for most of my life I didn't think mattered. Something I always saw as a weakness, but I was wrong. The words were simple, but their impact was seismic. He had admitted fault publicly. For years, I built my success on being strong, on never backing down, never forgiving people who crossed me. I thought that was what made me a winner, but then a little girl, just 8 years old, stood up and asked me a question that I couldn't
answer.
The screen cut to a split frame showing Emily Patterson watching from her family's modest living room, her hands curled around her pink notebook. She blinked in surprise as her name echoed through the hall. Emily Patterson, Trump continued, his voice softer, asked me how I forgive people who've hurt me. And in that moment, I realized I didn't have an answer. Because the truth is, I never really had to forgive anyone. I fought, I won, and I moved on. But what if that's
not what strength really is?
The hall remained silent, but across the country, social media lit up. Is this real? This is the most presidential speech Trump has ever given. Emily Patterson just made history. Trump exhaled, his hands gripping the podium tighter, as if steadying himself. We live in a country divided, not just by politics, but by anger, by resentment. And I've been part of that. I know that. I've fought my battles, and I've held my grudges, but tonight, I want to say something I never
thought I'd say.
He paused. Let the weight of the moment settle. I forgive. A murmur ran through the audience. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled furiously. But Trump pressed on. I forgive those who've tried to bring me down.
I forgive the media, even Karen Mitchell, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all make mistakes. And if an 8-year-old girl can have the wisdom to ask about forgiveness, then maybe the rest of us need to start listening. Eddie, home. Emily's mother wiped a tear from her cheek, pulling Emily close. He listened to you, she whispered. Meanwhile, in her newsroom, Karen Mitchell watched with a complicated expression.
Her career had been built on exposing Trump, yet here he was, extending the very grace she had struggled to accept. Trump continued, his voice firm, but not aggressive. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it isn't weakness, it's strength. And, as Americans, we need to stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as people again. That starts with me, and I hope it can start with you. He stepped back from the podium. No grand gestures, no political slogans, just those words lingering in the air. And then applause. Not the roaring partisan campaign rally kind, but something quieter, something deeper. A genuine response to something real. Social media, which had spent years amplifying division, suddenly found itself awash in something different. Unity. I forgive. Thank you, Emily. Forgiveness is strength. In homes across America, families who had been divided by political arguments sat quietly, realizing that maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go. And in a small house in Dayton, Ohio, Emily Patterson smiled, setting down her notebook. Her question had been answered, and America, in ways no one had expected, had started to heal. In the days following Trump's speech, something remarkable happened. The national conversation, once dominated by division and bitterness, shifted towards something softer, something rare in American discourse, unity. And at the center of it all was an 8-year-old girl with a pink notebook. News outlets ran feature, stories on the Emily effect, how one child's simple, sincere question had done what political strategists, journalists, and world leaders had failed to accomplish for years. Churches, schools, and community centers across the country organized discussions on forgiveness, using Emily's words as the starting point. Universities held forums on the role of compassion in leadership, and even late-night comedians, normally cynical and biting, spoke about Emily with genuine reverence. Talk show hosts clamored for interviews. Ellen DeGeneres invited her onto her show. Oprah called. Even former presidents from both sides of the aisle praised her in public statements. Emily Patterson reminded us all of something we had forgotten. President Carter, now in his 100s, wrote in a rare public letter that the strongest voice in the room isn't always the loudest, but the truest. At her school in Dayton, Ohio, Emily was overwhelmed with letters from children across the country. Some told her that they had asked their parents the same question she had asked Trump. Others told her they had forgiven old friends, resolved family feuds, or even found peace with themselves. A handwritten letter from a 12-year-old boy in Texas stood out. Emily, I never forgave my dad for leaving us. But when I saw you on TV, I asked myself what you asked Mr. Trump. And today I called my dad for the first time in years. Thank you. In Washington, members of Congress referenced Emily's words during speeches urging bipartisan cooperation. Her face appeared on magazine covers, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol. Time magazine named her the youngest person to ever receive Person of the Year. Her simple message: forgiving isn't losing. It's just being brave enough to give
someone another chance,
became a cultural mantra repeated by teachers, parents, and leaders across the country. Meanwhile, in her quiet neighborhood, Emily remained blissfully unaware of just how much she had changed the world. She still helped her mother pack sandwiches for the local shelter. She still played outside with her friends. She still carried around her pink notebook, filling it with new questions. One day, a reporter managed to catch her outside her house, politely asking, "Emily, how does it feel to be called the voice of America's conscience?" Emily thought about it for a second, then smiled. "I just asked a question," she said simply. "I think people already had the answers." And with that, she ran off to join her friends, leaving the world to catch up with the wisdom of an 8-year-old who had, without even trying, reshaped a nation. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was filled with a sense of finality, of triumph. Donald Trump stood at the podium, basking in the glow of applause. The event was meant to be a celebration, a moment to solidify his transformation from a divisive figure to a man who had, against all odds, embraced the very idea of forgiveness. The applause swelled, cameras flashed, and journalists eagerly typed out headlines cementing his redemption arc. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the power of forgiveness, a national conversation. His speech had just concluded, and the atmosphere in the room was electric. Then it happened. A figure moved swiftly toward the stage, cutting through the security perimeter with the practiced urgency of someone who had done this before. It was Daniel Roth, a veteran investigative reporter, one of the few people whose mere presence could send chills down Trump's spine. Roth leaned in, whispering hurriedly into Trump's ear. It was just a few words, barely a sentence, but whatever was said instantly changed everything. The shift in Trump's face was unmistakable, the warmth, the ease, the newfound sincerity, all of it vanished in an instant. His jaw tightened. His hands, which had just been gesturing smoothly moments before, clenched into fists against the podium. His knuckles turned white. The applause faded. The murmurs started. The audience sensed the shift. Karen Mitchell, standing at the back of the room, narrowed her eyes, instinctively recognizing a moment of seismic importance. Emily Patterson, seated in the front row with her parents, looked up, noticing the sudden stiffness in Trump's posture. Cameras zoomed in. The world watched. Trump didn't move for several seconds. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then finally, he stepped back from the podium. His mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came. His face was unreadable now, except for one undeniable emotion. Something had changed. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Phones buzzed in reporters' hands. Something was happening. Something big. Roth took a step back, his expression neutral, but his eyes telling another story. He had just dropped a bombshell. Trump inhaled sharply through his nose, his gaze flickering toward the audience, toward the cameras, toward Emily, who was watching him carefully, her young face filled with quiet curiosity. The room was waiting. Trump exhaled slowly. Then, with calculated precision, he turned away from the podium and walked off the stage without another word. The audience erupted in confused murmurs. Emily looked up at her mother. "What's happening?" Her mother didn't have an answer. Karen Mitchell, heart pounding, pulled out her phone and sent a single message to her editor. "Find out what Roth told him, now." And then, as if on cue, all the screens in the ballroom flickered, cutting to breaking news.